Hi everybody, Matt back with you and Tom. Today we're in Brighouse, heading towards a place where one of Britain's best known legends actually came to an end. It's a story that's been around for over 8 centuries at least. Do you know which one I'm talking about? So we are in the woods at Kirklees, and naturally the story I was talking about is that of the legendary outlaw Robin Hood. Here in Kirklees, though, is apparently where the story of Robin Hood came to an end. So we're going to find, hopefully, the last resting place of Robin Hood. Robin Hood is the legendary outlaw of English folklore, literature and film. Tales of Robin Hood have been told since back in the 13th century. Back then, the tales of Robin Hood were in the forms of ballads. And it's only in later years that the introduction of other characters from the story, like Little John, Friar Tuck, and later even still Maid Marian. And of course, there's been plenty of adaptations of the story, ranging from Disney's Fox, usually battling the Sheriff of Nottingham, even up to more modern film releases like this one from 2016. But which is your favourite Robin Hood? So the story of Robin Hood you might not be as aware of is Robin Hood's last day and his passing and potential murder. And it took place here at Kirklees Priory. Now this is the only building that still stands of the original 12th century priory. The original priory was built in the 12th century as a Catholic nunnery in Kirklees, although then it wasn't called Kirklees. The priory itself gives Kirklees its name. The gatehouse still stands today. The final ballad that was written about Robin Hood is actually called Robin Hood's Death, and is obviously from many centuries ago, and is one of the oldest existing tales of Robin Hood. In the story, Robin is reportedly, possibly, maybe even in his 80s, and he goes to get himself bled at the priory, which was a common medical practice in medieval times. The act of bleeding was done by the prioress at Kirklees. Unfortunately, she is the villain of the piece because she treacherously lets out far too much blood. And the prioress's lover, Red Roger, as Robin is bleeding to death, also appears and stabs Robin too. Robin, however, is still able to mortally wound Roger, also known as Sir Roger of Doncaster. Robin blows his horn 3 times to summon Little John and tells him that he's going to fire his arrow, and wherever the arrow falls is where he must be buried once he's died. Just as you think you're about to lose the battle, with the rhododendrons, we find Robin Hood's grave. So here we are, the legendary Robin Hood's grave in the woods of Kirklees. So, as we know, the story of his death is that Robin is on his deathbed in Kirklees gatehouse, which apparently still stands somewhere here today. I'll put some pictures up later. And as he's dying, fires the arrow into the air and says, wherever it lands, that's where I need to be buried. Apparently it landed here, roughly 650 metres from the gatehouse. Now, the grave itself has been here, obviously, quite a few centuries. These things around it are later additions to protect the stone, obviously, but also there's a very strange custom happening in the 19th century. So, inside we see the stone. So the story of the stone is that in the 19th century it was rumoured that if you took a chipping off the stone, it would help cure toothache. So they had to put this around it to try to stop people from essentially chipping at it. But let's have a closer look at the stone. So you can see there would have been things chipped off over time. Not sure if that's a phallic symbol. Don't think so. And we have an inscription here. Now this is possibly Old English, but most studiers of language say that this is not actually a language that ever existed. But in modern English, this is what it says. Put into a modern language, the inscription reads, "Here underneath this little stone lies Robert, Earl of Huntingdon. Never an archer was he so good, and people called him Robin Hood. Such outlaws, and he as his men, will England never see again." 24th of December, 1247 AD. Of course, when there's things like a grave to a legendary character, there's this mix between fact and fiction. Now, the Robin Hood from the stories we know, leaping about the trees in Lincoln Green, may not be quite the wrong one, but there are reportedly a few different people who that Robin Hood legend could have been based on. In 2015, they brought radars to this spot to scan the ground. Those radars suggested that there was nothing here at all. Before we discontinue the story altogether, let's not forget that there are people in graveyards from the 1800s who have vanished altogether. There's nothing left after being so long in the ground. If you go back even more centuries, what are you going to find? If you want to believe the story, why not? In the 1800s, Kirklees Hall was owned by Sir George Armitage, and at that time, for anybody who had maybe a knighthood and a large mansion, it became commonplace to find amongst their staff a fool or a jester. And at Kirklees Hall at that time, they had Hal. So this character is Hal of Kirklees, George Armitage's fool. George Armitage had taken in Hal, and he was quite popular amongst his family and other staff members. However, at one point, George hired a joiner called Robbie, and Robbie was not particularly popular with Hal. So, after entertaining some guests at a dinner, Hal was given £0.50, which back then was quite a lot of money. It was a silver coin. Hal, of course, had absolutely no idea about the value of money and wondered what to do with it. Robbie suggested that if Hal buried the coin in the ground, that in the morning there would be more coins in its place. So Hal agreed to this, and he buried the coin, and in the morning was quite overjoyed when he went back and found a number of small copper coins. It was only later that Hal was told that those coins were almost worthless compared to the £0.50 that he'd been given. So essentially he'd been tricked, and knowing he'd been tricked, Hal swore vengeance. Later that day, at dinner, Robbie failed to appear, though he had been seen going earlier in the day to his workshop. At the end of dinner, Hal said, "I've played a trick on Robbie. I've hidden his head under the wood shavings, and when he wakes, he'll have trouble finding it." The crowd at the dinner table headed to the workshop, and they did indeed find Robbie's head under the shavings. Hal followed and even tried to reattach Robbie's head to his body, unaware, really, of what he'd done. Now, this tower was built in 1905 and is a replica, if you like, of a fort. So it hasn't been here as long as everything else, but it does still stand despite being ruined. It's quite impressive. So Hal was put on trial at York. It soon became clear at the trial that he was unable to really fathom out what he'd done to himself. There he is, there's Hal of Kirklees. And so during the trial it was decided to release Hal back into the custody of George Armitage, and he returned here to Kirklees Hall to spend the last of his days. And apparently he was very regretful about what he'd done, because it finally figured out that he'd committed murder. And he died about 30 years old, apparently a very grey-haired, sad-looking old man. The story of Hal of Kirklees was actually used as an expression locally for many more years to come, even though it would have been said in dialect. It was kind of transcribed as bad as Hal of Kirklees Hall. And foolish investments became known as Hal's £0.50. We also found a bunker nearby as well. There's just a few photographs taken at the bunker. So, from Kirklees, from Robin Hood's grave, this fabulous tower, we shall leave you till the next video. Take care. See you soon.